basically picked Rudolph up by his face mask, tore the helmet off, and smashed him on the head with it. I don't even know what Garrett was thinking, but I know he's not going to be playing for a while. Later in the ensuing skirmishes, I guess, Maurkice Pouncey of the Steelers was also ejected, kicked Garrett in the helmet after he was on the ground. But the Browns win the game. They keep their season alive. But then they finish it like that. Keep in mind, Demarius Randall was ejected earlier in the game for hitting Deontay Johnson late in the head, injuring him and knocking him out for the game. That's 3 guys from the Browns got ejected in this game. Ejected. And the narrative for the Browns has been how head coach Freddie Kitchens has this team undisciplined and seems to be more or less okay with it. We'll see how he responds, but that's a remarkable way to finish a game. And I don't know what you do. If you're the NFL, I mean, it's very simple. I think you have to suspend Garrett for the rest of the year. I mean, there's not many things you could do that are more dangerous on a football field than hit a guy's unprotected noggin with a helmet. That is incredibly dangerous. Very fortunate that Rudolph wasn't more seriously hurt. Although you really don't have any idea. I mean, you'd have to think he's got a concussion or something.
So, Sean, Adam Schefter just tweeted out, one word, assault.
Yeah. I mean, you do wonder. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the legalities of it, but I know that there have been things in sports before where if it hasn't been part of the play, that sometimes it reaches a different level of, that reaches to the level of where you have to actually address it with the law. And I don't know. I just know if you're the league, you basically have to suspend it for the rest of the season. End of story. I mean, it's not even a discussion. You got to be done. And, Rudolph did reach for Garrett's helmet and arguably reached for it first. Dan Hellie of the NFL Network, a guy that I think rather highly of, interviewed more than a few times. And Dan on Twitter, I think, did a great job responding to it. He said, yeah, but that's the equivalent of someone cutting you off on the freeway so you decide to rear end them at 80 miles an hour. I mean, if you're Myles Garrett, you cannot do what you're doing. And the strangest part about it is this is at the end of a win. I know that there's a rivalry. I know that the Browns are pretty chippy. I get that. But you have to be a lot smarter in the win. That's something where sometimes you see teams that are losing do because they're upset and the game's over for them and they kind of lose their minds a little bit. But winning, you have to be so much smarter than that. That's an incredibly foolish thing to do. And it's going to be disastrous for the Browns, which are trying to hold on to very slim playoff hopes, which they actually did do with the win. And then you're going to lose one of the most dynamic defensive players in the league. Myles Garrett had 10 sacks coming into this game. He was tied for third in the NFL in sacks. That's not a guy you can afford to lose. Incredibly stupid, dangerous play. A black eye for the league. And for the Browns in particular, Pouncey gets ejected too. You can't kick a guy in the head with his helmet on. You can't kick the helmet. I get all that. But at least you can understand Pouncey's protecting his teammate to an extent. But Garrett gets ejected. Larry Ogunjobi gets ejected. Demarius Randall ejected earlier for a cheap shot late. 3 Browns ejected in a game? That's just an embarrassment. Freddie Kitchens has to get his team in some sort of order. Fortunately, Baker Mayfield, I guess, talked to Fox after the game on television, said it's inexcusable. I don't care if it's a rivalry or not. Didn't talk about who started what or anything like that. Maybe Mayfield has to be a leader more than Kitchens. I don't know. But that's a disaster for the Browns and a disaster for the league. Kevin has Mayfield. Let's hear what he had to say there.
I didn't see why it started, but it's inexcusable. I don't care, rivalry or not. We can't do that. That's kind of the history of what's been going on here lately, hurting yourself, and that's just endangering the other team. That's inexcusable. He knows that. I hope he does now. It's tough. We'll see.
Mason Rudolph, a friend of yours, Myles Garrett, as you were watching it.
That's from Fox, and that good for Mayfield, because it would have been very easy, I think, to kind of dance around it and say, well, both teams were fighting, blah, blah, blah. Good for Mayfield. Somebody's got to be the adult in the room, I guess, here. So good for him. Had a good game as well. We'll talk about this. We'll take you up until midnight tonight, but we have some prizes tonight. So callers number 4 and 5 win a 4-pack of tickets to the Kicker Monster Truck Nationals. Experience the nation's biggest monster trucks Friday, November 15th and Saturday, November 16th at the National Western Event Center. Plus, see the Tough Truck Competition and Freestyle Motocross Show. Find your Kicker Monster Truck National tickets at ticketswest.com or at the door, or you can win them right now. Callers number 4 and 5 at 303-713-1043. Get your tickets, take the family out to something fun. This is the Fan Late Night. We'll be back next. After that crazy finish in Thursday Night Football tonight, NFL will have a lot to unpack there, using a helmet as a weapon. Not something you see very often, fortunately. Denver Broncos will head to Minnesota to take on the Vikings in a game that means a great deal to Brandon Allen in his career, as well as Drew Lock. When we look at the quarterback position and what might happen with it, this is going to be a very difficult game for the Broncos to win. I've talked about it before. The Broncos' defense is very good. If you go to points per game, though, you can look at all sorts of metrics that you want. I get that. For me, the one I like the most is points per game. For obvious reasons. That's how you win or lose. The Broncos are outstanding in points per game allowed. They really are. They're very, very good. And they're very, very good at a lot of things on defense, despite the fact that it's kind of patchwork in a lot of ways. Broncos are 7th in the NFL, allowing 18.9 points per game. The Vikings are 5th at 18.2. So it's not as if the Broncos have a massive advantage on defense in this one. They are, however, at a massive disadvantage on offense. The Vikings are 9th in the league in scoring at 26.2 per game, and they've been better than that in their last 5. Almost 30 a game. The Broncos, 28th. 16.6 per game. So already right there, you have about a 10-point differential on what the Broncos and Vikings offenses generate, and about a half-point difference on what their defenses let up. Possibly not coincidentally, the line on the game is Minnesota by 10 right now. Right about what the numbers would say it would be. So it's a tough game for the Broncos. What does it mean if Brandon Allen doesn't play well? I don't think the Broncos are going to rush to Drew Lock. They seem to be playing this out in the most conservative way they possibly can. So that's not going to happen. Don't expect Drew Lock to start in Buffalo no matter what. Could he be the backup in Buffalo? Maybe. We've talked about it before, that the narrative that Drew Lock all of a sudden has to start from scratch like he's never played before, well, it doesn't really hold water. Because if you go to the preseason, in which he did play, he actually had already established himself as the Broncos' number 2 quarterback. At minimum, he arguably looked better than Flacco, although Flacco had a very minimal sample size. Allen looked better than Flacco in just one game. But you compare those preseason stats. Allen, of course, was on the Rams at the time. Pretty comparable. Both Locke and Allen played roughly the same amount of time. Allen had 18 more pass attempts. But their passing percentage is only 3% different. Allen threw 3% more. Averaged about a yard more per pass attempt. But Locke threw 1 touchdown and 1 interception in that span. Allen threw no touchdowns and 3 picks. The QBR for Locke at 71.9 was substantially better than Allen's 63.1. Rippon, by the way, 61.5. Locke outperformed Allen as well in the same situations, playing similar defenses. So the idea that the Drew Lock has so far to go doesn't really hold all that much water. Now, the difference is purely, at this point, in the playbook. That's basically what it boils down to. It ends up being Lock's ability to pick up the Broncos playbook, the West Coast as opposed to the spread, something that Allen had more experience in and has reportedly done very, very well in picking it up. But it's not as if Rippon was playing in a complete pro-style offense at Boise State either. So the hurdle for Drew Lock, in my opinion, is rather minimal to be the backup. And if the Broncos were to lose against Buffalo and Minnesota in the next 2 weeks, they should seriously be looking at starting Drew Lock against the Chargers. Make the argument, and I have made the argument, it should have been earlier than that, but nevertheless, if the Broncos lose the next 2, they're 3-8. Forget it. Even the slightest dreams of being playoff relevant go by the wayside. The game the Browns win tonight makes it more difficult for the Broncos too. As the rest of the AFC kind of hovers in the middle, this sort of mushy middle of the AFC where everyone's got 4 to 6 wins, it's easy to look at the Broncos 3-6 record and go, yeah, they're right there. So you just need a couple more wins. But it's not really how it works, because it just means it's more teams the Broncos have to jump over. But all these teams are playing each other. They can't all lose. So the last week of football made it harder for the Broncos. The Cleveland win makes it harder for the Broncos. And if you have another week like last week where there are upsets galore and a bunch of these 4-win teams beat 6-win teams or things like that, it makes it harder for the Broncos, regardless of what they do. Because there aren't enough games left to make it up over all these teams. As it stands right now, the Raiders hold the tiebreaker and would get the final spot in the playoffs in the AFC, as it stands right now. But the Broncos would have to jump 7 other teams in their final 7 games to get the 6th spot. That's going to be really tough when there are divisional games left and everybody in the AFC West is ahead of them. So, could Drew Lock be the backup against Buffalo? I could see that. I think it'd be very wise for the Broncos to do that, whether Brandon Allen led them to a win or not. That seems like the right move. And hopefully Allen goes out there and looks amazing. But I'm not counting on it. And I'm not counting on Drew Lock being amazing. But I think you have to know what he is. I think there's a consensus there. So all of that comes into play for the Broncos. It's not only this game, it's not only what it means for this year, but it's what it means for next year, too. Want to remind everyone we still have some prizes. We still have more. You didn't get them last segment. Callers number 4 and 5 win a 4-pack of tickets to the Kicker Monster Truck Nationals. Experience the nation's biggest monster trucks Friday, November 15th. That's tomorrow. And Saturday, November 16th at the National Western Event Center. Plus, see the Tough Truck Competition and Freestyle Motocross Show. Find your Kicker Monster Truck Nationals tickets at ticketswest.com or at the door, or win them right now. Callers number 4 and 5 at 303-713-1043. The Broncos also have some questions to answer about free agents. They've moved on from one in Emmanuel Sanders. And everyone's thinking about Chris Harris, and everyone's thinking about Derek Wolfe. Well, one of the hosts here at The Fan is thinking about another one that might really make you nervous. I'll explain next. The Denver Broncos have a few free agents of significance. Chris Harris, Derek Wolfe, maybe the most familiar among those names. But obviously, they're not the only ones. One of the more interesting ones is Justin Simmons, who's having a terrific season at safety and will be an unrestricted free agent at a position that, quite frankly, is in demand. And for the Broncos, you'd have to think that Simmons is a priority. You have to think that Simmons is a priority because he's taken every snap this year. Literally every snap. Only two players for the Broncos have done that, Simmons and Connor McGovern, and he's played very well. He's 27, pretty much in his prime, in line for a raise. And while the Broncos look at some of their stars, Harris and Wolfe, and maybe Shelby Harris behind him, other players that have been valuable like Adam Gotsis, it's Simmons that maybe ends up being the most important because he's the youngest and he has an opportunity to be a significant player as the Broncos continue their rebuild. The rebuild that they're having that they don't necessarily believe they're having or realize they're having, but they're definitely having. Orlando Franklin was on The Morning with Sandy Clough, had an interesting opinion about Justin Simmons, and it sounds like it might be a little bit in line with something I've told you about a couple weeks ago. This is something, quite frankly, that I agree with. I brought this up a couple weeks back. The presumption that Justin Simmons will be absolutely back as a Denver Bronco. Presumably, when the Broncos restructured Joe Flacco's contract to free up immediate money, the idea was you'd use it to shore up your existing free agents, right? That makes some sense. Otherwise, they attached themselves unnecessarily for a length of time to Flacco that they didn't really have to. But you put this together, and they got Andy Janovich signed. They haven't gotten Justin Simmons signed. What I suggested a couple weeks back is that Simmons had better get signed quickly by the Broncos. They better have taken that money and get him signed ASAP, because if he hits free agency, all bets are off. There's no guarantee he's going to stay. Because look at the experience he's had. Bronco fans look at it and say, all right, why would you not want to be with the Broncos? Team with a great history of winning. They win Super Bowls. They're always in the mix. But if you're Justin Simmons, here's what you know. Your rookie season, following a Super Bowl win, they went 9-7. The year after that, 5-11. The year after that, 6-10. Right now, the Broncos are 3-6. So they're on pace for another 5-11 season. And they might be lucky if they get that. So What Justin Simmons has experienced as a Bronco is a team that has gone 23-34 since he's arrived and hasn't made the playoffs yet. Not once. So he can hear about all the Broncos' greatness, but he's never experienced it. He's never been on a team that was better than third place in his career in its own division. So if you're Justin Simmons, hitting the market at the right age, at the right time, with an outstanding season, why would you, and this is the trick I think for Broncos fans to think about. It's why I think Orlando has a point. He played. He knows how this business in the NFL works. If you're Justin Simmons, try to put yourself in Justin Simmons' shoes. I like the Broncos fine. I've done a lot of good in Denver. Terrific with charities. It's been their man of the year. Their Darren Williams winner. And he's been a very good player. He's taken the leap forward that everyone wanted him to take this year. And you are hitting the market. And yes, the Broncos organization has been great. But to your experience, they're a team that's been 11 games under 500 at this point, and you've never been higher than third place in the division. Why in the world would you not take a look at what's around you? And if a winning team wanted you, why wouldn't you take it? Just because the Broncos drafted you? I think even fans understand there's no loyalty from that. There's no loyalty from the teams to the players. Remember, players sign contracts, but they're not guaranteed, and teams get rid of them all the time. Players are starting to understand that. That's why you're seeing Ezekiel Elliott's and Melvin Gordon's and Jadeveon Clowney's of the world dictate their own situations. If you're Justin Simmons, you've earned the right to be an unrestricted free agent and to be looked at by teams that maybe look at you as one of the pieces of the puzzle to be a contender. Why would you not be more interested in that? Why would you want to return to the Broncos, who have had nothing but an atrocious offense since you've arrived, watched your time be more or less wasted on a pretty good defense, and then watch an offense, quite frankly, with a revolving door of quarterbacks that gets no better? That's where this Drew Lock situation comes into play in a lot of things. Brandon Allen, with all due respect, is 27. He's been in the league 3 years. He's a journeyman. Now, could he be a really good backup quarterback? Sure. Is he the future of the franchise, a starter? Doesn't really look like it. Don't mean any disrespect. I think he had the best quarterbacking performance of the year against Cleveland. But I didn't see anything particularly special. Having Drew Lock play very, very well might be the difference between signing Justin Simmons and losing Justin Simmons. Because you need to show Justin Simmons that this is about to be a winning team and a contending team right now. Because guess what? He's going to have his pick of contending teams. And you think he's going to pick a non-contending team over a contending team if all the money's the same? Do you think that John Elway and the Broncos are willing to overpay Justin Simmons? Because if you're not going to be a contending team and you want to get a guy that can go to a contender, that's what you have to do. You have to overpay them. Broncos don't seem too inclined to overpay guys. So this is a very good point Orlando made. I've made it as well. I don't know why it's flying under the radar, quite frankly. If I'm Justin Simmons, I don't look at the Broncos the way Broncos fans look at the Broncos. I grew up here. I was born and raised in Colorado. I look at the Broncos differently, but I can look at it from Simmons' perspective and say, okay, great. I got drafted by this team. They gave me a look. I've played really well. Now it's my chance to look at what else is out there. I can always come back to the Broncos. They'll always want me back. But I'm going to look and see who else wants me. And you let a guy go out to free agency like that, no guarantees. None whatsoever. I think it's a good point Orlando made. And I made it months ago. But I didn't play. I didn't deal with this. Orlando's dealt with teams moving on from them when they still had contracts, including, the Denver Broncos who did that to him. It is a business, and the players are looking at it that way. Have another, by the way, we're getting your weekend set over here on the Fan Late Night. We have one more 4-pack of tickets to the Kicker Monster Truck Nationals. Experience the nation's biggest monster trucks Friday, November 15th. That's tomorrow, by the way, if you don't have a calendar. And Saturday, November 16th at the National Western Event Center. Plus, see the Tough Truck competition and freestyle motocross show. I'm not even going to lie. I've never gone to motocross, but I've watched it on TV, and it looks really cool. I liked riding dirt bikes as a kid, and I would undoubtedly really hurt myself, but that's there too. Find your Kicker Monster Truck Nationals tickets at ticketswest.com or at the door, or you can win them right now. Caller number 4, 303-713-1043 wins that pack. So hop on and get that. The Broncos wide receiver situation is dire already. And Deshaun Hamilton tweaked his knee at practice. You may not be thinking that matters all that much based on what Deshaun Hamilton's done this season. But wait till you look behind him. What does that mean for the Broncos? We'll talk about that next. For the Denver Broncos, a little bit of injury news. Bryce Callahan may end up on the IR. Finally, has not done anything this season due to complications from last season's season-ending injury to his foot. And that would be disappointing for the Broncos, who spent all this time putting Drew Lock on injured reserve and couldn't even practice with him. Because of that, only to watch Callahan, who probably rightly should have had that spot, but the Broncos were desperate and hoping that they could compete this season, kind of deluded themselves a bit, and then had dragged this out and found out that he couldn't play. In the exact same situation right now, if they would have put Callahan on instead of Locke, if Callahan had gotten better, then they could have activated him now. Sounds like they might not get him at all. Mike Kliss of 9 News suggesting that Callahan will be put on injured reserve earlier today, something that I suspected after he missed practice on Wednesday, shortly after the small attempt to do so on Tuesday. Obviously, a bad sign. Deshaun Hamilton kind of tweaked his knee today during practice. So for the Broncos, let me just give you the stats. Courtland Sutton is, of course, the number one wide receiver. Got 44 catches for 692 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Broncos' second leading receiver is still Emmanuel Sanders. 30 catches for 367 yards and 2 touchdowns. Noah Fant is the Broncos' third receiver, but second, as it stands. 23 catches for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. The next wide receiver is Deshaun Hamilton. 11 catches for 106. Sandwiched in between Fant and Hamilton are Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay. After Hamilton is Jeff Hireman, who is also hurt, with 8 catches for 78 yards. Then Andy Janovich, the fullback, 4 catches for 39 yards. The punt returner Deontay Spencer, 5 catches for 31 yards, is the next leading receiver. So if Hamilton can't go, it's Courtland Sutton and Deontay Spencer, who has 31 receiving yards, going against Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes. Now, the answer, naturally, is Tim Patrick. The Broncos haven't said whether he'll necessarily be activated just yet. He is expected to be. Does he step immediately into the number 2 spot? We'll talk about that, but first I want to go to the RamosLaw.com text line. That's 303-713-1043 and talk to Butch. Butch, how are you?
Getting it on with Sean again. How are you, man?
I'm doing good.
Good. Well, you were a plethora of information last time. I want to talk about Broncos, their quarterback situation. First off, I guess I could put in my prediction for the Minnesota game, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I think it's equally as bad of a matchup as it was against KC at home, if not worse. So I figure I don't remember the exact score, but I know it's
30
about
to
21
6
points. I'm going 34-13.
Okay.
Minnesota. I just think this is the worst matchup of the year on the road, in that turf, and we'll see what happens. But as far as Broncos and their quarterback situation, the information you gave me, and I heard it on the afternoon show too about Joe Flacco. My point is, and still will continue to be, Drew Lock and Allen, in all likelihood, although this young quarterback sometimes never get better, but will improve, whereas there's basically a 0% chance Joe Flacco will improve. Best case scenario, he's as good, as bad, whatever terminology you want to use, next year as he is this year. So I hear some talk about, Flacco will be back because of Elway's stubbornness. I just think that's a huge mistake. You got a couple quarterbacks, one in particular, obviously, where, footwork, don't have good mobility, but, you got good footwork like Tom Brady, who's, one of the, few quarterbacks that can't move that much and still extremely effective, and in fact, a great quarterback. But even on a good offensive line, for the most part, unless you have a Drew Brees or somebody like that, you need a quarterback to move. You got 250-pound linebackers that run as fast as 200-pound safeties did. You know, you've lived in Colorado your whole life, and you've been following football a long time. You know what I mean? And it just doesn't work. So, and you can't have a guy making $20 million a year on your practice squad. I mean, would they actually be crazy enough to, after June of next year, not release Joe Flacco? I mean, I just see no way around it.
Yeah, and Butch, great points, by the way. And I agree. And I like the way that you put it with Flacco, that who knows how much Drew Lock could improve. Who knows how much Brandon Allen could improve from ages 27 to 28. But they're likely to improve, at least a certain percent. If you were to look at this like stocks, right? You would say, all right, these are up-and-coming companies. They might not be able to succeed, but the odds are more likely that they can at least improve a little as opposed to revert. But in Flacco's case, what we saw this year is probably as good as he can get. All he can do is revert. And because of that, I'm going to be honest, I don't think Joe Flacco's ever going to play for the Broncos again. I really don't. I think that they are going to do what they did basically with Case Keenum. They will find a way post June 1st, where the dead cap runs to about $3.4 million, to move on from him then. If they can find a trade, great. If they can't, they'll just let him go. And I do think they're going to do that. I don't think Flacco's going to be back. I think that was enough of that. I think the Broncos at this point might even prefer Brandon Allen. And when you talk about footwork, which another good point that he brought up there, the difference between mobility and footwork, and yeah, you're kind of getting into semantics there, but there is. You were to say, look at all the way back to say Dan Marino, but Tom Brady is a terrific example of a current quarterback. He is not mobile. You do not want Tom Brady running. But Brady, with a little sidestep here or a little step up there, does a very good job of evading moves whilst remaining in the pocket. And that is absolutely a skill. So is that something that Drew Lock can learn? Is that something Brandon Allen can learn? Is it something that Allen already has a little bit of? Well, maybe. I saw Lock do some of that in college. Obviously, it's totally different. And another good point Butch brought up is that's the adjustment, by the way. You got to remember that the talent level in the NFL is insane. There's nobody in the NFL that wasn't basically a star on their college team and was probably one of the 2 or 3 best players that's ever played in their high school, ever. So, I mean, it's a little nuts. When you move as a quarterback, you start to realize that, okay, the linemen may be 285 pounds coming at you, but they move like the linebackers that were 230 that you saw in college. The linebackers that were 230 that you saw in college looked like the 180-pound safeties that you saw in college, and the safeties are as fast as the cornerbacks, and the cornerbacks are probably faster than anyone you realistically saw for any stretch of time in college. So that's one of the adjustments, and adjusting to that speed is a big part of it. So that's one of the challenges for the Broncos going forward, and it's one of the reasons that I think Flacco is as good as he's going to get. So returning him for the Broncos, I don't, and I understand that the Broncos are stubborn about this, and I know they're notoriously conservative in the way they've been obtaining quarterbacks since Peyton Manning retired. But I think they saw enough here. I do. I think they saw enough here that Flacco is probably not back. That money's better used somewhere else, even if it's the dead cap hit. Might need to use some of it on Justin Simmons. Other action happened, by the way, in town. The Colorado Avalanche were in Edmonton. Denver Nuggets are playing their game now. We'll get to them a little bit later. But the Avalanche, after getting a remarkable win and a remarkable performance, well, let's just say the follow-up wasn't quite as good. We'll get into the Avs and Oilers next. Colorado Avalanche fall to the Edmonton Oilers tonight in the Great White North, 6-2. Adam Werner, who made his NHL debut against the Winnipeg Jets a couple nights ago, didn't formally get a shutout because starter Pavel Francouz got hurt 31 seconds into the game. You have to get all 60 minutes to get the shutout. But Werner was lights out. First time anybody shut out the Jets all year. He stopped 40 of 40 shots. And understandably, Coach Jared Bednar rode the hot hand. The Avs called up Antoine Bibeau from the Eagles to go ahead and back up Werner tonight. And it didn't go so well for Werner. The follow-up, let's just say, not as strong. Werner gave up 5 goals on 18 shots. That's not great. Let's put it that way. He got pulled 28 minutes into the game. Bibeau, welcome to the team, buddy. You are in. He saved 9 of 10, gave up a goal as well, but obviously was better. Edmonton just had themselves a game. Connor McDavid, obviously, if you follow hockey at all, you know how good he is. 3 goals, 3 assists. And if that wasn't enough to add insult to Leon Draisaitl, good player, obviously, gets no goals, but 5 assists. So a tough sledding for the Avs tonight, obviously. And not the performance they were looking for, but the injuries have been really problematic. I mean, you're talking about missing out on 2/3 of your top line, which is arguably the best line in hockey when it's healthy, with Mikko Rantanen out and Gabe Landeskog out. And then you lose, not one, not just Philip Grubauer, but you lose Francouz. You are now on your number 3 and number 4 string goalies. And I guess given all that, you could make the argument that the Avalanche have probably overperformed to a certain extent, given those injuries. Joining us now, courtesy of Bud Light, is our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater. And AD, obviously this is not the way they wanted it to go, but at the same time, as I kind of look at this game, and look, the Avs are on goalies number 3 and number 4. I mean, how many teams win games in that situation at all?
Yeah, not too many, Sean. It was. I mean, I've seen situations where multiple goalies come in, and the injuries happen to goalies too, but rarely do they happen in pairs like that, so close. And the Avalanche used their 4th goalie of the season tonight, Antoine Bibeau, who called up yesterday and thrown into the breach tonight after, Adam Werner couldn't do any wrong in his first game, couldn't do much right in his second game, couldn't finish the game he started tonight. He couldn't finish the game he didn't start the other night. That's hockey, man. It's a humbling game, and Adam Werner got his first taste of humble pie tonight. And Connor McDavid, that's going to happen sometimes. The goalies, he's happened to pretty good other goalies too. Connor McDavid, what he did tonight, but. Unfortunately for the Avalanche, Connor McDavid set a career high in points tonight. So not a good night from the goaltending perspective. But I really don't think anybody played well tonight except for Andrei Burakovsky, who scored only 2 goals tonight for the Avs.
Yeah, and does that mean in this case? I mean, McDavid with the 3 goals and 3 assists, Draisaitl with the 5 assists. That's probably a career high for him too. And then Nugent Hopkins punches in a couple of goals too. So it's not like they were giving them away to the 4th liners. I mean, these were the stars getting it done for Edmonton. Given the injuries, given the fact that they just got blown out, they didn't play well, is the silver lining to this game this kind of one you just kind of throw up in the garbage bin and say, you know what, we're crumpling up the score sheet. This was one of those nights. Forget about it. It happens in an 82 game season. Let's go out there and get them next time.
That's exactly what it was, Sean. Nobody should make too much or any more than there was tonight. It's a shorthanded team that got beat by a hot Connor McDavid tonight. That's just going to happen, right? It's going to happen sometimes. So I don't think any goaltender who was in the net tonight would have stopped what he did, and won a game. He was flying tonight. His shots are just, everybody talks about his speed with his skating, and it's unbelievable, of course, but his shot is so fast, too. He's got a great shot. I hadn't seen that kind of marksmanship, in person by him before. I was, to me, it was like he's got a wrist shot to me that seems just as good as, like, Joe Sakic had in his prime. Joe's wrister was off the rush was about as good as I'd seen in the league since I covered the league. Maybe Brett Hall too, but his is just right up there too, and he's a total package. So everybody should just call it what it was: a bad night in Edmonton against Connor McDavid. No more, no less. On to Vancouver.
The Avs have still won 3 of their last 4, and they've done so by putting up a lot of goals. Really, when you look at this, in this 4-game streak, even with the loss, they've scored 17 goals in the last 4 games. So it's not as if the offense isn't there, even without all the other guys. Now they go on to, there's 3 more games on this road trip: Vancouver, Calgary, Minnesota. What's the word on either of the goalies, Grubauer or Francouz?
Well, I think it's pretty good. Up in the press box tonight, I ran into, not literally, but I ran into Pavel Francouz up in the box, and he seemed very, very, I don't know if I can diagnose somebody based on saying hi to somebody, but he certainly didn't look in pain. He wasn't gripping his head or anything. He was said a nice casual hello, kept walking, and so I think from the word I hear that he's going to be maybe even back on skates here in a day or two, if not tomorrow in Vancouver. Grubauer is a little still taking his time. He keeps practicing every day, which is great, obviously, but apparently just not ready to go yet. Not even on the bench, as a optional backup. So I guess we have to keep waiting on him. He is on the ice, though, skating. He's on the trip, so it seems close, but I guess you never quite know, do you, until they say he's in. But so I think there's good news soon. But I guess the question is, if neither Francouz or Grubauer can go against Vancouver, I guess there's Adam Warner's going to be the guy again. I guess we're not going to know that till tomorrow, probably. But I think overall it's going to be okay with the 2 injured guys. It's not going to be a long-term thing at all.
He is Adrian Dater, our Avalanche insider. Follow him on Twitter at @ADater and on ColoradoHockeyNow.com. If you don't have a subscription, get one. You get everything that AD puts together, and keep yourself warm out there in Edmonton. And you're still up in the Great White North, so enjoy that. But stay warm, and we'll catch you next week.
It.
All right, take care, Adrian.
Thanks,
Hey.
man. I had to buy a coat today.
Oh, that's right. Well, yeah, because I just checked. It's 30 degrees. So I'm glad you got one.
Jacket. I finally broke down and brought a real winter jacket for the first time in a couple of years. So I broke down and bought it at a little mall here, and so I won't freeze to death, Sean.
There you go.
Well, I guess we'll talk to you next week, won't we?
Yeah, we'll check back with
Calgary.
you against Calgary, exactly. and it'll be nice knowing you won't have hypothermia. Thanks so much, AD. Take care.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right. That was Adrian Dater. Thanks to Bud Light, official beer sponsor of the Colorado Avalanche. A tough loss for the Avs, but honestly, I think he had it exactly right. Look, Connor McDavid is one of the best players in the league. Draisaitl's really good. Nugent Hopkins is really good. You're playing with your number 3-string goalie. Look, sometimes you go on the road and you play a really good team with superstars on it. Sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. That was one of those days tonight for the Avalanche. So hopefully better days are coming as they get a little bit healthier as well. But again, they've won 3 of their last 4 too. So these things happen. We'll take a peek, by the way, at the Denver Broncos and where they might go in a draft. That's right. Mock drafts. It's a little early, maybe a lot early. But with the Broncos trending towards a top 10 pick, it'd be interesting to see where the rest of the country believes they might go. You might be curious, and you might be concerned. I'll explain next. Early mock drafts are coming in, and you're seeing a little bit of a trend. Jerry Jeudy of Alabama, talented guy. C.D. Lamb, Oklahoma, talented guy. They're wide receivers. Now, we talked about the Broncos' wide receiver issues, of course. At the same time, I understand they don't have anyone opposite Courtland Sutton. They really don't. I mean, anybody opposite Courtland Sutton. Deshaun Hamilton has 106 yards, and that's their next best guy. Oh, and by the way, he might be hurt. And Deontay Spencer has 31 receiving yards. He's next. So, obviously, the team takes a look at Tim Patrick as he's expected to come back. Tim Patrick was the Broncos' fourth leading wide receiver last year. Played in all 16 games, but had 23 catches for 315 yards and a touchdown. I'm not sure Tim Patrick, who Vic Fangio actually early in the preseason sort of called out as being slow. Not sure he's the exact answer either as your number two receiver. So I can get why some people maybe look at it and say, well, the Broncos could be in the hunt for a receiver. If the Broncos pick a wide receiver with a top 10 pick in this draft, everybody in the front office should immediately resign.
Even if it's Laviska Shenault?
Everybody. I love Laviska Shenault. Injury problems are a concern. I wouldn't pick him in the top 10 either. Because the Broncos aren't in a position. It's not even Jerry Jeudy who looks electric. But it's a dependent position.
It's the least amount one you need to worry about.
Right. If you have an offensive line, that's a non-dependent position, right? Those guys, you say hike, they go push somebody around. That's the job. Go shove the guy in front of you. That's just up to them. Doesn't rely on anybody else to get the job done. Quarterbacks need the offensive line. Wide receivers need the offensive line and the quarterbacks. The Broncos don't have an offensive line or a quarterback. Getting a wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, I know they don't have a number two here yet. I get it. I do. But drafting a wide receiver in the top 10 for the Broncos would be like buying a giant hood ornament for a Pinto. There's no point. Your engine is throwing rods through the hood of your car right now, and you're going to get a hood ornament. You don't need it. You need an engine. You need an offensive line, and you need a quarterback. There are a few other mock drafts that are a little more sensible that show Jeff Okudah, the cornerback from Ohio State. Okay. If Chris Harris leaves, I could see that. You're going to need someone opposite Bryce Callahan if Bryce Callahan ever plays. Or at least somebody opposite Devontae Harris or Duke Dawson if Chris Harris leaves, or more accurately, when Chris Harris leaves. So, okay, I guess I could see that. Grant Delpit out of LSU, big safety. Okay, I could see that. Justin Simmons and Will Parks are both free agents, like I've talked about, like Orlando Franklin talked about. Justin Simmons may not be back. Everyone who's assuming he's coming back is looking through orange-colored glasses because they love the Broncos, and they love the Broncos history, and it means something to them. Like I said, all Justin Simmons knows is a team that's only been third or fourth place since he's gotten to Denver. So I could see that, I guess. I think the Broncos should go quarterback or offensive line. I hope they don't have to go quarterback because you hope that Drew Lock can step in at some point and you can see enough and say, all right, this guy's going to get it. Good enough. Maybe he's not a Hall of Famer, but this guy looks like he can start for us. So you don't have to go get a quarterback. The problem is, let's just say hypothetically, right? For some reason, because a lot of the teams that are going to be ahead of the Broncos don't necessarily need a quarterback. Now, two of those teams are going to be ahead of them are likely to be Miami and Cincinnati, both of whom appear to be in the need for a quarterback. But hypothetically, let's say they're not. Let's say like a Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa drops to, say, 7, where the Broncos are picking. If they don't know what they've got in Drew Lock because they haven't played him, you have to pick that guy if he falls to you. You have to. You have to. And maybe it turns out they don't need him. That's why it's so important to take a look at this. But oh my gosh. Obviously, it's early for mock drafts. Somewhere, Cecil Lammey is feeling a disturbance in the force of me talking about mock drafts and getting annoyed. And he loves mock drafts. I mean, he loves mock drafts. And even he's going like, oh, I don't know, man. It's mid-November. Let's relax a little bit. Everyone just kind of, ease up on the mock drafts. Stay frosty, if you will. We'll worry about that later. But the Broncos can't pick a wide receiver. That might be short of picking a kicker or a punter.
I would rather take a punter.
I don't think any position the Broncos could pick in the top 10 would make me more irate than wide receiver. Literally. I can't think of one. I could live with a corner. I could live with the safety. I could live with a linebacker even. Even though the Broncos seem to maybe have that short up a little bit, I could live with it. I could certainly live with a lineman on either side. Running back wouldn't make me happy. Maybe a running back could make me slightly more frustrated than a wide receiver. But even a running back, you can just hand it off to and they find a hole. Wide receiver, the top 10 would make me absolutely bonkers. I mean, go get Roberto Aguayo again or whatever.
In the second round.
Yeah, however that works.
Worst draft pick ever.
Oh, I don't know about that.
It's up there.
DeMarcus Russell and Heath Schuler are over there waving their hands.
That story comes out about Jamarcus Russell, the blank tapes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was watching blitz coverages. There's nothing on them.
Yeah. Then again, Brett Favre came into the league, and according to teammate Ty Detmer, he didn't know what a dime defense was. It didn't seem to hurt him. Broncos aren't going to pick a wide receiver in the top 10. They've done some weird things in the draft, but they're not going to do that. No way. There's no chance. The Denver Nuggets had an interesting game tonight. Their effort in the first half was atrocious. Yet again, Michael Malone seems to have maybe had enough of that. Decided to go with some different players on the court. Look for someone who was going to give him what he wanted. And it worked. The Nuggets roar back in the second half. Hold Brooklyn to 32 second half points while scoring 52 of their own. Win 101-93. Our Nuggets insider Matt Moore will join us to talk about that next. The Denver Nuggets get a win tonight. The effort was in question for a decent chunk of the game. Then kind of seemed as if Michael Malone had enough. Our Nuggets insider Matt Moore joins us courtesy of Budweiser. And Matt, seemed like Michael Malone hit on something in the second half, started putting in players and waiting to see if someone would actually give him good quality minutes, and he found them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I want to credit the players, though. I think, Mason Plumlee, Monte Morris, Jeremy Grant, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, that second unit brought the energy. Malone post-game talked about some strategic stuff they fixed in terms of the pick-and-roll coverage that helped the Nets miss, I think, their last 15 three-pointers, which was huge. Kenny Atkinson mentioned that it was really tough for them defensively because the Nuggets were basically running off of every miss. So when the Nets went cold after the Nuggets made adjustments, the Nuggets were pushing the ball with energy and focus that was missing with certain players in the game and the starting units. And as that wore on, that was really what fueled the run. Impressive game from Monte Morris, and Will Barton again just sparks the Nuggets and carries them. It was Will Barton and Paul Millsap with the starters tonight, and then that bench unit making a huge push in the third with their effort and energy.
Yeah, Barton, again tonight, really did. He's been playing as well as in this stretch as I may have ever seen him play on the Nuggets. Has there been anything in particular that sort of triggered this in games where the team has looked flat? He's actually been in a handful of the couple of games, really carried them through.
I think a lot of it is he came in motivated because there was an open competition for his spot, and he thought that was ridiculous because he was coming off of a really bad injury last year that he never got right from, and he took it personally. And I think that lit a fire under him. And then from there, I think a lot of it is Barton has always been a type of player that he really is, as much as, his offensive game is self-dynamic, I think in a lot of ways, maybe the word to put it. He's also a guy that wants to do what the team needs. It's what he learned in Portland. It's what he's taken to in Denver. So when Jokic has it going and the first unit is cracking, he's willing to spread the floor and, do the little things and just move the ball. But when the starters are playing with such lethargy and just not moving with any urgency, he has filled that gap. I mean, somebody's got to create, and I'm going to do it. If nobody's going to get to the rim, I'm going to do it. If nobody's going to step out and take a big three, I'm going to do it. And that, I think, reflects a lot on who Will is as a person and as a player, as somebody that's willing to do what his team needs in order to get a win.
Monte Morris comes off the bench in 19 minutes, gets 10 points, 7 assists, 3 boards. Didn't shoot the lights out 4 for 11, but he thoroughly outplayed Jamal Murray tonight. Credit to Morris, but what'd you see with Murray today? Was it just one of those games, or was he doing something that maybe gets him in trouble like we've seen in the past?
Malone had his back post-game talking about how he still wanted to take on the Kyrie Irving assignment and did pretty well. I think that's probably true. This one, I specifically wonder if there's an injury going on, not to kind of excuse his performance, just watching the way that he's moving. He's also just taking a lot of mid-range jumpers. The biggest thing with Murray right now is when he finds himself open on kickouts, he is not catching and shooting. He is catching, checking, and then making a decision that often results in a pull-up jumper. And if he's just, catching and firing, he's probably getting better looks from three that the Nuggets really do need from a shooter as good as he is. So there's a lot of things that go into it. I think he's still pushing. I think he's got a little bit of a foot injury. I think those things are combined. I didn't see a lot of pressing from him in this game. He could have, tried to carry on and taken his turn of doing the Will Barton stuff and didn't really get into that. And I think that's honestly a good sign that he didn't try and do more in this game and hurt the Nuggets even further.
Yeah, Murray 1 for 11 for 4 points tonight, 1 for 4 from the 3-point land, and not a very impressive game for him, but the Nuggets get the win anyway. There was a Juancho Hernan-Gomez sighting tonight, provided a lot of energy, hit the boards hard. What'd you see from Juancho tonight, and does that mean more minutes might be coming?
Yeah, we kind of thought, I told you after last game it was probably coming. Malone mentioned he was probably going to change up the bench rotation. He said it before the game. He mentioned Juancho's name. Nuggets officials were talking before the game about how there's going to be rotation changes. Torrey Craig removed entirely. And he did. He provided a spark. I think Juancho comes with high energy, and that means big plays and big mistakes. And in the first half, you saw a lot of really bad rotations. He's one of the worst closeout players on the Nuggets, but he also had some huge offensive rebounds in that stretch in the third. A big layup on a cut to the lane to get a score. Really, the energy for a team that just needs something to pick them up, they need energy to push them through right now because nothing's clicking offensively. And Wancho provided that, and I think that he's going to be in the rotation going forward until things change.
At the halftime of the television broadcast, Charles Barkley basically talked about the Nuggets' effort and said that to him, they looked like a team that kind of was buying into their press clippings. I don't know the exact quote, but he basically said that they look like a team that just expects to win without having to try too hard. You've talked about that all season long thus far. Did the effort holding Brooklyn to 32 points, did it feel like maybe something clicked for the Nuggets that's sustainable defensively?
Well, the defense has been good all season. Outside of the Hawks game was the one aberration where they did not have it defensively. It's been there for them, and they've won games with it. And the question is, does that get tougher when you face the elite teams, which Denver hasn't yet? And that's going to be the problem. For that, they're going to need their star players to play the best that they can. They need a better Nikola Jokic, like flat out, and period, and dot. But in games like this, that defensive energy is definitely carrying them. They still need to find a balance, but I think the defensive energy has been there. And again, you got to credit the bench unit for coming in and setting a tone down big of, we're going to get stops, we're going to run off guys, and we're going to push the ball. The Nets were gassed. Like, they had them altitude lungs by the start of the fourth quarter, and it was evident. And a lot of that's just the way that the bench kept at them. The Nuggets have ways to win when Nikola Jokic isn't playing well. They do not have ways to win enough games to be the team that they want to be this season without Nikola Jokic. But if this is how they're going to stay above water until he gets through whatever it is that he's going through, then maybe that'll work.
I got a weird question for you, and we've seen it after the last couple seasons. Is Mason Plumlee being wildly underrated as an impact player on this team? Because, again, in this second half, I watch him taking charges, going out there and blocking, making efforts to deflect shots, go ahead and do all the dirty work. Is he a little more of an important player than people think, not just the backup center?
I think he is boom or bust. I think when he's playing well, Plumlee's incredible. I think that he's, like tonight, he was a huge difference maker. He controlled the boards after, the Nets were beating them to its offensive rebounds in the first half. He controlled the glass and, again, pushed the break to keep the Nets back on their heels. He finished more inside. But then you saw stuff in the first half, like the jumper that he took and the three-pointer that he took, where he always goes for home run plays to try and do the whole, to make the biggest play possible in his minutes. I think sometimes that hurts him. But when he is playing within himself, and when the guards are playing like Monte Morris and Will Barton did tonight, that sets things up very well. His finishes inside were huge. He definitely deserves a huge chunk of credit for the Nuggets comeback.
We're talking with Matt Moore, our Nuggets insider. Follow him on Twitter at Hardwood Paroxysm. And Matt, they get a tune-up now on Sunday, get a little bit of rest, get a tune-up against a bad Memphis team, but they are on the road. The Nuggets, for all the things that we're kind of nitpicking about, are 8-3 and have won 5 out of their last 6 games. But this game against Memphis is a tune-up for what's going to be a big, big game coming up on Wednesday against Houston. How do the Nuggets focus on the Memphis game and not look ahead?
I think they probably will look ahead. I think, quite honestly, I think their chances in that game are dicey. The home crowd picked them up tonight. We'll see. Memphis is tricky. Memphis is sneaky. Memphis has a lot of talent. John Morant and Jaren Jackson and Brandon Clark are all really good. Those are good young players that are going to attack them. Now, they're a bad defensive team, but so are the Nets, and the Nuggets struggle with them for most of this game. And so are the Hawks, and the Nuggets lost to them. The Nuggets are not above beating that team. So if they do not find themselves, but all these defensive teams, I think, allow an opportunity for them to find themselves offensively. The question is, can they ever find it? They should be finding it against teams like Atlanta and Brooklyn, and they haven't yet. Maybe Memphis is the one. But, yeah, I actually like their chances versus teams like Houston, the teams they have to get up for. This is a TNT game, and they, eventually they brought it. They do better, I think, in high-profile situations because of a little bit of that entitlement that we've talked about in the past.
Well, thank you very much for checking in with us. I know this was a late one for you, but at least it ends up with a win and a great finish. The Nuggets looked like a totally different team in the second half. Good to talk to you about it, and then we'll touch base next week, especially with that Houston game coming up. That'll be a big benchmark for this Nuggets team coming up.
Absolutely. Talk to you next week, Sean.
All right, thank you so much. That is Matt Moore, our Nuggets insider, brought to you by Budweiser, the official beer sponsor of the Denver Nuggets. And It's interesting because we're sort of nitpicking the Nuggets. They are 8-3. But he talks about Nikola Jokic. Jokic, in this case, he did lead the team in scoring with 18 points. That's not lights out. But it's only the fourth game of the season out of 11 in which Jokic has led the team in scoring. That's okay. It's good to have balanced scoring. But as you pointed out, when the Nuggets take on the Houstons of the world, they're going to need a different Nikola Jokic than the guy that they've gotten. Fascinating ending to Thursday Night Football tonight. Fascinating is probably a nice way to put it. Disappointing, embarrassing, shameful, those all apply too. We'll talk about that next. That was part of the mess that happened at the end of the Thursday night football game. The Browns win 21-7. That ended up being an afterthought after a really ugly finish. Late in the game, Mason Rudolph of the Steelers ended up kind of scuffling with Myles Garrett, kind of reached for Myles Garrett's face mask. And I understand emotions run high. I understand this is a rivalry game. But Garrett then completely overreacts. I mean, you're winning, man. Take the W. You're winning. Just relax. You're Myles Garrett. Mason Rudolph is not going to hurt you. And Rudolph kind of grabs for it. Then Garrett just loses his mind. Grabs Rudolph's face mask, basically picks Rudolph off the ground with his face mask. The helmet fortunately comes off, but then Garrett's holding it by the face mask and clubs him over the head with it. Naturally, that led to a field-wide set of little skirmishes and Donnybrooks and whatever term you like to use for that sort of thing. Maurkice Pouncey ends up kicking Garrett in the helmet after Garrett gets knocked to the ground. It ends up with Garrett and Larry Ogunjobi, the Browns, being suspended. Ogunjobi basically knocked Rudolph to the ground later. Pouncey, of course, is ejected as well. Demarius Randall of the Browns ejected earlier for a cheap shot on Deontay Johnson. Browns are going to get a really dirty reputation really fast, but I don't think Myles Garrett's playing again this year. I know the NFL is loath to suspend a guy that's in the top 5 in sacks and was the number 1 overall pick, but you can't let that go. It's absolutely reprehensible behavior, something that his own quarterback, Baker Mayfield, said on Fox after the game. Mayfield, his credit for a guy that, gets the reputation as being something of a loose cannon and something of a hothead, and not entirely undeserved, but in that case, Mayfield's the voice of reason. I really appreciate it. It's not, you don't like to have to call out a teammate, but at the same time, I think it's okay to be realistic about it and actually point out, hey, man, we actually might be on a roll. We have if you're the Browns, you're thinking, if you're Baker Mayfield, we have the easiest schedule left in the NFL. Number 1, according to the win-loss records, the easiest schedule left. Just knocked off a division rival. We actually can make some noise in this thing. And your best defensive player goes and does that with 8 seconds left on the clock in a game that you had won. That's bonkers. After things cooled down, I guess to his credit, Garrett didn't seem to be wanting to pin the responsibility on anyone else. Well, he's wrong about the last part, but I'll give him credit for at least taking responsibility and not say, oh, well, Rudolph grabbed my mask, whatever. Dan Hill of the NFL Network basically said that the equivalent is someone cutting you off on the freeway and then deciding to rear end them at 80 miles an hour. Yeah, Rudolph in the last couple seconds of a game kind of reached for your face mask because he was frustrated and angry and losing. And not okay to do that. I get that. But the overreaction, I mean, Can't do that. Like Garrett himself said, it's going to cost his football team. Very lucky Rudolph isn't more seriously hurt. Give Mason Rudolph credit. This guy got a shot to the chops earlier in the year that was one of the most violent hits I've ever seen in the NFL. Ever. And he comes back from that. Somehow, if you didn't see it, it's remarkable. Garrett did not exactly tap him on the head. I mean, this was the straight caveman with a club crack him over the skull with his own helmet. I cannot believe Rudolph was not more seriously hurt. That dude, he had a bad game, okay? If that matters in the grand scheme of things. He had a rough game. 4 picks. You can't question his toughness. Goodness. And it did overshadow the game. Garrett's wrong about that part. It did. No one even in Cleveland is going to get to talk about the big win. And it was a big win. A statement game on national TV. You generate tons of turnovers. Baker Mayfield was really good at times. Really active in the pocket, moving around, creating plays. They got a good game out of Nick Chubb. They finally got more connections with Odell Beckham, with Jarvis Landry. 8 catches between the two. And no one's going to talk about it, even in Cleveland. Because you're about to lose your most significant defensive player for a long time. And who knows if you lose Randall either to a suspension. The Browns have got to get themselves under control here. Just embarrassing. And it's embarrassed the entire league. If you don't think this is all everyone's going to talk about now between now and Sunday's games, you're deluded. It is. It's about as violent and as aggressive and as awful an action as you can really take on a football field, and it was completely unnecessary. And it's really a shame. And I don't think there's anything you can do except suspend him for the rest of the season, because you can't allow that to happen. They are so lucky that Rudolph didn't suffer a severe injury, or at minimum get some sort of very ugly cut that would have made it even look worse on television. It's a disaster. You're worried about player safety in the NFL? Garrett better not play till 2020. It's the only statement you can make. Disappointing finish. Black eye for the entire league. And the fact that there are very few current players or ex-players on social media rushing to his defense probably tells you all you have to know. It's awful. No excuse for it. Baker Mayfield had it right. Inexcusable. We'll hand it up to our friends at Sports Center all night. You can expect they'll talk more about that. Be back tomorrow. We'll break down the Broncos and the Vikings. The Broncos keep their season alive, even a little bit. For Kevin Kistner in the booth, my name's Sean Drotar. S-Drotar on Twitter if you'd like. That's S-D-R-O-T-A-R. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you tomorrow. This is The Fan Late Night on Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan.